Beer Trek has traveled to the South Island of New Zealand, to the most English city in this part of the world, Christchurch, on the banks of the River Avon. And we're at the Ducks Deluxe House Brewery. And this has nothing to do with any kind of poultry at all. Ducks Deluxe actually is Latin for Masters of the Finest. Here I'm drinking one of their finest beers. This won a silver medal at the 1998 Australian Beer Awards. It's the Hereford Bitter. Not really a bitter, more of a dark Munich lager, as they say. Plenty of dark Munich malts in there. Fully malty aroma. Distinctive chocolatey, roasty taste. A full-bodied beer. Definitely the best beer of this color I've had in this part of the world.
We're here in beautiful Christchurch, an English settlement on the South Island of New Zealand. And we're at the brewery known locally as the Ducks. And I'm enjoying their Nor'wester Ale. And interesting that they would have a Nor'wester Ale because that's the northern winds, which I don't think we'll get any here, but those southern winds are pretty chilly, let me tell you. And this is, I would say, an English special because even though it's light in body and has great malt flavor, it is a hefty 6.5%. Wow. This is what Dr. Nort would call a dangerous beer. Cheers.
Actually, I think your beers are very nicely carbonated.
Yeah.
Of course, we like it flat, but we'll accept a little bit. We'll accept a little bit, and even though yours are carbonated, I think they're pretty nicely done.
Yeah.
Hey, baby, a shag? Well, you want a shag here at Ducks Deluxe, they probably will give you the Black Shag Stout. And this is a nice, I would say, dry stout. But it's got a sweet middle. Boy, it's hard to peg this one, but it's got tons and tons of dark chocolate flavor. Beautiful beer.
Still here at Ducks Deluxe, and we're having the Southwester this time. It's obviously a stout, and it is a sweet stout. Alcohol evident in the aroma, fairly sweet with a little bit of roasted malt. Full-bodied beer, very sweet. The roastiness is under control, and it's only available in the winter months, which is September here in New Zealand.
Located at the Arts Centre in downtown Christchurch, Ducks Deluxe and brewer Richard Fife add another little touch of England to Christchurch. New Zealand, or Aotearoa, a former English colony, is composed of 2 islands. In the North Island, Auckland is the main city, while in the South Island, Christchurch is the largest city. Colonized by members of Christchurch College of Oxford in the 1800s, Christchurch is a bit of Victorian England in the South Pacific. Canterbury Draught, or CD, is New Zealand's oldest brewery since 1854. We were told they only produce industrial lager. So instead, we guided our bicycles to Harrington's microbrewery.
Both our malts actually, we did use the domestic malts until quite recently we bought our malt in these 1-ton tote bags, predominantly from Canterbury Malting Company. But we tend to get our malt now imported from Australia. It's actually a slightly better quality malt we find than what the country malt was coming to us like. We should be getting a delivery today. In fact, that's probably outside now.
But yeah, we should have probably about 5 tons of it coming in now. Yeah, basically use caramel malt, crystal malt, black malt, chocolate malt. We use a little bit of amber malt. And then any specialty beers we do, we may import some different types of specialist malts. Yeah, we don't have a malt press silo. We crush the malt as we need it in situ. It's crushed straight through into the mash tun as we mash it in. That's just liquid sugar. We use 1 or 2 of the brews I was just telling you about before. We do quite a few whole malt brews. 1 or 2 brews aren't whole malt, so we tend to use the liquid sugar there, which consists of maltose, maltotriose, glucose, small amounts of glucose.
We just came from Australia, so we're pretty used to sugar in the beer.
Yeah. Well, it's worldwide, really. I mean.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The English do it quite a bit too.
Yeah. Mash tun. Probably don't need to explain how all these things work and what we do, and the kettle as well.
So how many different beers do you produce?
I think we do about 11 or 12 different beers in total. We do have quite a good range, really.
That's a very big range.
Yeah.
That's why you have so many fermenters.
Yeah, we've got 11 fermenters. They tend to be needed during the summer. This summer we're looking at probably having to go to double shifts, doing 2 brews a day, just the way things are looking. I mean, all the way through winter we've been brewing sort of 4 days a week. Summertime, obviously, you can almost double that. So, yeah, there's a propagator here for propagating yeast, any yeast cultures, whether it's for a specific type of beer we're doing or whether it's our regular lager culture. Most of the beers, in fact all the beers fermented here are lager, bottom fermented beers. We have another smaller brewery down the road, which is where we do our top fermented beers, and a couple of our slower selling bottom fermented beers as well. But most of these, we collect 7,000 litres in the kettle, and by the time we get to bright beer we end up with around 6,000 litres. Most of the beers probably in three stages in the kettle. A couple of beers, 1 or 2 we do add into the whirlpool as well. Just to get some of the filtering on 1 day of the week.
You filter all your beers?
Yeah. We've just actually ordered some casks from the UK. We're going to start cask conditioning beer as well.
Really?
Only to a small extent, really, yeah.
Is there a demand? Is there pubs that are going to?
No, it's going to be more of a showpiece type thing, you know, like just a novelty type showpiece.
Like at shows and festivals and things?
Yeah, that sort of thing. Maybe 1 or 2 restaurants in town. Yeah, pretty much like in the UK where they still bring the Shire horses out to pull barrels of beer around.
Right.
Just a showpiece, but that's pretty much what we'll be doing with the cask, really.
But you do keg your beer, right?
Yeah, we keg beer, send it out in tank form, and sell it directly from bright beer tanks through this bottle store at the brewery here. But mostly kegs and tanks. We have a tanker that takes it out.
Right. We saw that. Yeah.
But we've just gone into bottling. We've always had the bottling plant for a couple of years, but we've been just bottling RTDs, which are like bourbon and cola, alcoholic lemonade, that type of thing.
Now, what do you use as guidelines for what we'd call maybe an Australasian dark lager?
Yeah, that's
What is it?
Yeah, it's a dark lager, but again, it's not overly hopped. Although there's probably a little bit more in it than say a draft. But it's basically, with ours is a
Roasty.
yeah. What you'll find, like the Spates Old Dark, is that it's just full of caramel, and that's where the colour comes from. So you taste it, it's very sweet, sugary, caramel, and not much roast taste. Whereas this is whole malted. To get that colour in there, and it's a bit whole malt, you know that there's been dark malts used in there, which we do. We use chocolate malts, black malt in that, as well as crystal malt.
Yeah, roasted barley in there.
No,
Tastes like you do.
yeah, it's just a black malt with three.
So is this closer to a Municher dark lager, a Dunkles, or maybe a dark mild, or somewhere in between, or?
Yeah, it wouldn't be like a dark mild because of the simple fact for a start that it's actually bottom fermented. Like a dark mild originated from England, it's always a top fermented beer, and it'd be lower in alcohol as well, and mild traditionally. Yeah, it's probably a mixture of all. You find that the styles here tend to be of their own type, and it's not something that, unless it's a best bitter that we brew that's on an English style bitter or whatever, they tend to be their own defined styles, really.
We're at the new Harrington's Brewery on Ferry Road in Christchurch, and this used to be the Castle Rock Brewery. Closed down. Harrington's took it over. So did the Red Jack brew pub up the street. Harrington's is left now, and we're having their best bitter. Wonderful, fragrant English hop aroma. They import those from England. Some sulfury notes to it. The water is Burtonized, and a very crisp, clean hop finish. This beer is all about hops, and that's a good thing.
We're here at Harrington's in Christchurch, a microbrewery with an extraordinary range of beers. I didn't quite count them all, but I know it's more than 10 and less than 20. Well, besides tasting all their beers, we've been enjoying Christchurch, a beautiful city, and this is a stout, which actually is brewed in their sister brewery in Nelson.
Sleepsy, basically. It's really great.
Oh, a very drinkable stout. It's very clean and crisp. This is a session stout, and I can't say that about very many stouts. And the brewer mentioned that the reason they import their hops from England is because the New Zealand grown hops tend to be very high in alpha, and it can be very harsh. I don't get any of that in this beer. It's beautiful.
One of the larger microbreweries in New Zealand, Harrington's is owned by Craig Harrington, with a sister brewery in Nelson. Spates is from far south in Dunedin, but is a popular beer in Christchurch, as we found at the Bard on Avon.
To drink, perchance, to quaff. We are here doing just such at the Bard on Avon in Christchurch. But we're having a beer of distinction from Dunedin, often called Edinburgh of the South Island. And this is a beer of some distinction, a rather odd little ale, or lager. Fairly roasty aroma, something odd in there I can't quite place. Definitely more body than a lot of the mass-produced ones. Not a bad little beer. Spates made in Dunedin, although it might be produced locally. Not sure, but gonna drink it anyway.
Shakespeare indeed would be in love with this beer. It's from Spates Brewery, and we're drinking at the Bard on Avon, but not the Avon you might be familiar with. This is the Avon in Christchurch, which has many icons named after English counterparts. And this is one of the more distinctive dark ales in New Zealand. Spicy, malty with some kind of a licorice, weedy flavor at the end, hard to describe. Very unusual beer from the South Island city of Dunedin.
Located on the southern tip of the South Island, Spates is one of the oldest breweries in New Zealand, established in 1876. One of the great railways in the world connects Christchurch to to the west coast of New Zealand, covering 231 kilometers from the Christchurch foothills through Arthur's Pass to a height of 737 kilometers, and in Greymouth, once a gold rush town and the largest city on the South Island's west coast. Monty's has been brewing beer on the South Island's west coast of New Zealand since 1858.
Could have put these old boilers on the train you're on today and wheels aboard. You could too, huh?
We do about 45,000 hectoliters, which in American barrels would be about 40,000 barrels, and so that's about 1.3% of the national market.
He's been with the brewery over 25 years too. He started when he was 30 though.
Yeah, I feel like it.
So the brew house itself was installed in the late 60s. It's Steinecker brew house, and so we've been modifying it every continuous basis ever since to keep it up to date. It's a very good brew house, produces extremely good wort. We do about a 3-hour lautering and get excellent clarity, and that really makes a difference in the product you're going to produce.
But how many brews do you do a day?
1 or 2. Yep. So the wort boiler is actually slightly external here, and the whirlpool is outside as well. Original methodology in the 60s was that you would mash in the mash tun, transfer over to the lauter tun, rinse the mash tun, and then you lauter back in there to do your boil. So it served as a mash tun and a wort boiler originally, and then to give us a bit more flexibility on doing 2 brews and that sort of thing, we put the external equipment in. What they did at that point in time in the 20s is a bunch of very small cottage breweries basically that had been existing since the 1860s merged together, formed Westland Brewing Company. At that point in time, Monty's was the largest brewery going into the merger of the small ones that went together. There was eventually 7 breweries that went into the merger, and William Monty's was the only brewer, owner, operator sort of thing. The others had passed into the hands of lawyers and doctors and things like that. So it's carried on from the 20s. Certainly there's been a lot of major changes in the industry, and some of those are legal and societal sort of thing. Some of them are just technical, so the change from wooden barrels to metal kegs and things like that. The change out of wooden tanks into stainless steel tanks in the cellars. But it's also even very recently, here in the West Coast in 1990, about 90% of the beer was drank out of pub tanks. So we'd fill 1,200, 2,400 liters, 600 liters into tanks, tanker it out, fill a pub tank, and the beer you'd be having on tap would be coming out of that pub tank. Now that was going on in 1990, about 90% pub tank. By June of this year, we filled our last pub tank, so they're gone. And so it's a change where people are drinking more variety, more brands. Obviously in 1990 you only had one brand of beer on tap, and that was a big pumper. Now you're lucky to find a place that has less than 6 or 7 brands on tap. So a lot of change has gone on in a short period of time societally in the way they consume beer and the way they look at beer. And so those things have happened before, and it's not just technical sort of changes. So the fermentation cellars, we use shallow and open fermenters here. It's a fair amount of work, but we think that we get really good flavor out of keeping things very shallow. Develops really nice traditional estery characteristics in the beers we produce. We have a pretty decent yeast handling system, and because we don't pasteurize anything, it's a lot of hard work. Just elbow grease cleaning, really. If you want to come up top. The concept of using the shallow tanks is quite good to get the nice estery flavors out when the yeast is just starting to go. I mean, after all, it's yeast reproduction that gives you the flavors of beer, and yeast growth. And when it's in these situations, you get good growth. You know, I think it goes beyond just the flavor aspects as well, because there's certainly a lot of romance in doing it this way, but it's a lot of hard work maintaining them in top-notch condition as well. So you have to have a pretty dependable team behind you.
What stage is this one at?
What happened here is we brought it up with one brew yesterday, and we split between these two, and we're topping it with a brew today, and then we'll let them finish their fermentation. So today they'll be filled most of the way up, and then as they really get into fermentation, the froth will be very close to the top of the tanks.
When you skim it off, then what's on the top?
No, we carry it through and drop it to the bottom. For us, it's easier to keep it. We found that's easier to keep it clean. Our yeast, we can train it to the top or train it to the bottom.
How old is the yeast?
Well, it goes back into the early parts of this century at least. Yeah, this one here is just nice and cool. It'll go into beer storage tomorrow.
This is the famous black beer?
This is the famous black beer.
What would you say is the origins?
Quite cold, straight out of the filler this way.
What would you say the origins of the black beer style in New Zealand?
Well, I guess I'd probably say there's a lot of strange things come out in the last few years, I guess, this concept that black beer style originated in East Germany and things like that. What we were really doing is we were looking at a premium black beer that reflected the history and the origins of beer styles here in the west coast of New Zealand. And it was real malt emphasis on them. The alcohol tended to be slightly on the high side, up around 5.2% alcohol, a good high gravity, and a lot of malt flavors and characteristics. And it's that we go for. And when we called it black beer, it was because the feeling was that in the last 25 years since Guinness introduced the nitrogen concept, if you're going to call it a stout, you almost have to go towards a nitrogenated product. So although the beers would have been called a stout here prior to World War II, since then, you don't want to really call it a stout unless you're going to be looking at that nitrogen end of things. So we decided we'd just be nice and simple in our West Coast manner and call it black beer. And it was probably well down the track and out onto the market before we realized that there were some rumblings about a black beer from East Germany, but that's the way things go. So realistically, historically, there's a lot of very dark beers made here in New Zealand. Huge proportions of the beers between the wars were black stouts.
That late, amazing.
And it was really after World War II. There was alcohol restrictions on dropping the alcohols under 4% during World War II, and it was after World War II when those, because of some taxation issues and things like that, those 4% beers carried on, that the black beers started falling off. And so we felt that it was time to go back to a bit of the origins of the style here and bring it back. And as I say, just straight off the bottle filler here, she's a bit cold.
That's beautiful.
But lots of good malt flavors there, and that I think good clean malt flavors and a range of malt textures is what you want in a black beer. For that cleanliness, you have to be just as careful as you have to be in making a Pilsner or something like that.
Definitely. Well, thanks for the tour. We appreciate the quick tour. Brewmaster Keith Armstrong has won numerous awards with the unique black beer of Monteith's Brewing. We bid a fond farewell to charming Christchurch. And as the famous explorer Captain Cook, we must move on, or pedal on, to discover new beer destinations on Beer Trek.